So I am Marcia Questel. I am a BCBA. I've been working with people with autism for 22 years, which started with family members of mine being diagnosed. I have several neurodiverse family members between my family and my husband's family. And outside of being a BCBA, I'm also the content editor and externship co-coordinator for the Association for Science in Autism Treatment. And I help to review and edit our international newsletter every month. And I'm also a research fellow at the Yale Child Study Center here with Dr. Roger Joe. And if you have any questions or you want to learn how to reach me, you can go to my website, marciaquestel.com, and you'll find my contact information, my CV, and some of the research that I've been involved in lately, and sort of some of the things that I like to work on in my spare time. All right, so thanks so much for joining us. So this talk is sponsored by Spark at Yale. Every person with autism is different, and if you take part in research, scientists can make new discoveries that matter to you. If you scan that little QR code, you can email us. That's just an email us code, or you can just simply use the email or phone number that you see there. Spark is a genetic study that helps folks to learn more about the genetic underpinnings of autism, and as well, it powers a lot of the autism research that's being published today, which is through the Simons Foundation. Casey Sparks is something that we are very proud of here in Dr. Joe's group. We are so thrilled to partner with neurodiverse individuals from across the spectrum, and we have really rich discussions about autistic experience. And we're also working on an ethnography project, so we're looking at establishing and defining the autistic culture internationally. We have speakers from around the globe who join us, and you are always more than welcome to join us in these talks, and we would love to have you there. There's a link for Meetup, which is what we use, and this is a free group that meets often. Sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's more than that, and we would love to see you there. And of course, I always love to plug ASAT, the Association for Science in Autism Treatment, because this is a great resource for families who need access to evidence-based information. So if you go look at ASAT, you'll find a whole for-parent section. There's also for professionals. There's even stuff for faculty who are teaching college courses, and even more things like for doctors and for, siblings. So there's something for everyone there, and it's all really rooted in evidence-based information. And they also address misinformation in the field. So here are some of our objectives today. We're going to describe the importance of parental involvement in the IEP process and how they can be empowered. We'll outline common terminology used in formal assessments, illustrate how to highlight and notate evaluations to prepare for the IEP process, creating evidence to back requests. We'll explain how to create a target using behavior analytic processes and data collection, and demonstrate case study examples. So scores. The first thing everybody looks at when you look at an evaluation is the score. And I'm going to urge you to shy away from that. First and foremost, scores do not represent who your child is. I'm sure many have had experiences where they saw a score that made them really upset or really discouraged or even afraid. And scores just don't represent who our children are or how smart they are. You can Google or even use Google Scholar, which will give you really great evidence and published journals about the assessments that are being used. And you can gain lots of information about what the test is used for, how long it's been used, and what the subtests mean. I really urge you to do this because learning more about what these tests actually are will help you read through your evaluation more meaningfully. These scores are created by usually a stranger to your child who has had limited opportunities to observe them and is obligated to use these measures objectively, the same way every time with every person. So again, somebody in a room with your child who really needs to mark like they just didn't answer it, even if they believe that they could answer it, has to report what was actually done. And this stranger to your child may be somebody that they're not comfortable with, or it may be a room that they're not comfortable with. There may be stimuli in the environment that are overwhelming, and how your child performs, again, is just not representative of who they are. However, these scores should automatically be taken into consideration and inform services, supports, and strategies. The scores really are sort of that quantitative evidence that your school should be using to say, hey, they scored really low in this domain, or they scored really low on this test. So let's make sure that we're bolstering the program and the services to make sure that we address that need. Intelligence. So you know your child better than anyone else. Don't let that change. The expert model is there to work for you, not against you. So the experts who are involved in creating intelligence tests, who are involved in administering these tests and even explaining them to you, they are there usually to help everyone to learn more about their needs and the supports that would help them. But people can say ridiculous things. So I've heard so many horror stories about professionals saying things like, your child will never do this, your child has MR and you don't think that they do, or your child is unable or will not be able to do X, Y, and Z in their lifetime. And so it's really, really disheartening for a lot of parents to hear these things, and this will happen more often than you like. So it's important to develop a thick skin, learn to turn those feelings into drive, and develop grittiness. So I want parents everywhere to be full of grit, full of passion, and I hope that this talk really empowers you to know what your rights are and know how to turn these evaluations from something to be worried about into something that you can use as a tool. Intelligence is steeped in a very mixed history that has racial and political roots that should not be ignored. So I strongly suggest that you check out Radiolab Series G, which is about general intelligence, and it really does a deep dive into how intelligence was created, how it even became something that we look at, and it also is something that we can use to, again, get the services we need, but not without acknowledging who these were made for and who they were made by. The IEP is your individualized education plan, so it is individualized. You cannot accept that you won't get something from your school if they say, well, that's just not what we do, because that's immediately not individualized. It is a legally binding document, and you need to make sure that your goals are great, not just good, not just okay, not something that you feel uncomfortable about, but you go ahead and accept because you have this huge table of people telling you that this is the way it is. What goes on that paper is what they are obligated to do. What is not on that paper, they are not obligated to do. So if you're sitting at a meeting and a professional tells you like, oh, we always do that, we don't need to put it in the IEP, that's part of our program, think twice before you accept that. You can accept it, but I would warn you to make sure that it is in your legally binding document, because the only thing that the school has to be held accountable to is whether or not they're following the IEP. So I have some notes from New York State because I have a lot of folks joining us for this series from New York, but I also have some from Connecticut, and each state has its own notes. So you'll want to make sure that you look these up, but for the most part, a lot of them are very similar. But according to New York State, the IEP process will strengthen the role of parents and take steps to ensure that families have meaningful opportunities to participate in the education of their children at school and at home. So I think a lot of families that I work with don't feel strengthened. They don't feel encouraged by their school. So again, this should be what takes place. New York State should provide an important accountability tool for school personnel, students, and parents to measure students' progress towards goals and objectives, and to determine whether the school has appropriately configured how it uses its resources to reach the desired outcomes for students with disabilities. Information provided by parents regarding their child's strengths and needs is a vital part of the evaluation and is considered in developing an IEP. Again, this is what is supposed to happen, and you need to recognize that this is your right and that this is this is the gold standard, right? You are a vital part of your child's team, and that your information about your child's strengths and needs is really important for the evaluation process and developing the IEP. All members of the committee, which includes parents, share the responsibility to contribute meaningfully in the development of the IEP, and so on. I don't want to keep on harboring on this exact paragraph, but you get the point. The student's parents must be regularly informed of their child's progress. So regularly might be different for you. You might think like, I feel out of the loop. I don't hear from my school often enough. I only get an IEP update once a year. I don't think that's regular. And maybe you don't either. So make sure that you communicate with your school staff and let them know that you would like more regular communication about your child's progress. Are the parents' concerns and the student's strengths, preferences, and interests evident in the IEP? The evaluation reports are written in clear, precise, and easily understood language that is jargon-free, succinct, and provided in the language or mode of communication understood by the parent. So that also gets into language. Your IEP and all of the communication about the IEP should be written in your native language. Parent input is solicited. Okay, so not just welcome, right? Again, this is the gold standard, not just welcome, not tolerated, not considered, but parent input is solicited and discussed and given meaningful consideration in the development of the IEP. So I don't know the last time your school district reached out to you to solicit your input, but they should be soliciting your input and getting your feelings and your thoughts and your considerations, well documented via email. And just a real quick note on that, I strongly urge you to avoid phone calls with school staff, especially if you're in the midst of negotiations that aren't going well. So that's just a side note.
A lot of parents tell me, well,
They'd call me back,
they would
do this, they said they would do that. It doesn't matter if it's not in writing, because all of the email communications can again be used in a legal consideration if your IEP process has to go there. Recommendations, again, are written in a language that parents and educators can understand. What process and procedures are in place for parents and school personnel to inform the CSE if the student's not likely to meet his or her annual goals by the end of the year? I also see students all the time with goals that just keep rolling over year after year. They're not mastering them. They're not going anywhere. They just leave them on the IEP. That's a problem. All right, so this is from Connecticut. Again, I'm not going to read through all this. We have a lot of information to get through today, but the planning and placement team, there's this link there for the Parents Guide to Special Education in Connecticut. I urge you to go look at that and also really read it through. And as I did, do a search for parent, right? So I highlighted all the words that say parent by just pressing Control F and typing the word parent. So the parents of the student with a disability are part of the team. Make sure that you understand your rights. And this one I thought was really important. So upon request, the parent or guardian can request in writing the results of the initial assessments and evaluations at least 3 school days before the referral planning and placement team meeting that will discuss the results for the first time. So that's in that second paragraph. And it tells you that you're able to request the results of any of those initial assessments at least 3 days before the referral meeting. So you have a chance to go over them. You have a chance to ask questions. Upon requested by a parent, again, guardian, student, or surrogate parent, it's going to repeat that over and over. Upon the request, the responsible local or regional Board of Ed shall provide that person an opportunity to meet with a member of the team designated by the board so that they can go over the assessments and evaluations of the child who requires special education or may require special education. And such a meeting shall be for the sole purpose of discussing the planning and placement team process and any concerns the parent or guardian has. So again, you do have rights and they are written in the language in the government website. So make sure that you know them. This is just a note on timelines. Not going to go through that thoroughly, but this tells you all of the timelines and it's still in that link for the Parents Guide for Connecticut to know how to get through the IEP process. Here's a procedural safeguards notice, and this is from the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. The federal law concerning the education of students with disabilities requires schools to provide you, the parent, with a notice containing a full explanation of the procedural safeguards available under IDEA. And a copy of this should be given to you one time each year. I don't know the last time a lot of the parents that I work with received a copy of their procedural safeguards notice, but apparently you're supposed to get it at least once every year. You can also ask for a copy of these and they are obligated to give them to you. And you can also go to the link that I provided to review them yourself. So what next? Parents must feel empowered to participate in meaningful ways during the IEP process. Again, not optional, it's not to be tolerated. All of the emotions that you bring into the table are not an inconvenience, okay? Your participation is really necessary for the education of your child. They should be given ample time to share their thoughts, feelings, concerns, and questions with the team. So ample time is something that school districts don't have. And oftentimes they schedule IEP meetings back to back during IEP season. So you'll have a time slot that you're supposed to stick to, and all the decisions about your child's education and put on that legally binding document are to be done in that time slot. You don't have to do that. If you're not comfortable signing that document, do not sign it. Because as soon as you do, that means that what's on that paper is what they're obligated to do, nothing more, nothing less. And so if you need more time, you can say, I'd like to table this meeting, right? Which means I need to step away. We can re-adjourn, come back later. It is in the timelines and it is on the rights of the school district to make sure that they have made plenty of opportunities to contact you and that they've provided plenty of opportunities for you to meet with them. If parents aren't doing that, they do have a right to go ahead and implement the IEP that they have drafted. So don't delay and don't, drag it out. But if you are not ready to sign it, do not sign it. Remember, you are the most vital member of the team and your child. The decisions made for your child will impact what you and your child experience in the coming years of their education. While the rest of the team may evolve, you and your child will always be the center of this process. Make sure that you understand how to read your child's evaluations and assessments and ask questions. Again, ask questions. Make sure that you understand how to read the IEP itself. Here's some message from the CDC. The cost to society of less than optimal development are enormous and far-reaching. Children who grow up in environments where their developmental needs are not met are at an increased risk for compromised health and safety and learning and developmental delays. Failure to invest time and resources during children's early years may have long-term effects on the foster care, healthcare, and education systems. Evaluations, what do they tell us? Current levels of performance across skill domains, skill excesses, skill deficits, how one child is compared to his or her same age typically developing peers, and anecdotal observations from the evaluators regarding the testing conditions, modifications to those testing conditions, behaviors demonstrated by the child, strategies employed by the evaluator to increase on-task behaviors, challenges with noncompliance, etc. So skill excesses are just things that your child does in excess. Maybe it could be things that they do a lot of, maybe it's things that they do really, really well. Skill deficits are things that they don't do or don't do up to, their neurotypical peers. And again, most of the evaluations are normative. So how one child is compared to their same age typically developing peers. Something we remember, we know you know it, but please remember, testing is more often than not in a one-to-one arrangement. It's artificial and may not represent the skills they can demonstrate when they're more familiar and comfortable. If the child is demonstrating challenges during the one-to-one engagement, those challenges may be exacerbated in a group setting or classroom. So while it is an artificial setting, it's also usually a very controlled setting. So if your child isn't demonstrating something because they're not familiar with this person, they're not demonstrating skills that they
Otherwise can, right? That's going to be reflected of exactly what happens is going to be reflected in the evaluation. But it also is a reflection of maybe what they can do isn't generalizing across environments or generalizing across different people. So, on the one hand, it is artificial, but on the other hand, it still
can give you good information to think about. Also, if those challenges are occurring in that controlled environment, they may actually be worse in a more natural environment where there is more stimuli, there is more random things happening, random people present. So just think about it both ways, right? That it's artificial, it's controlled, right? What they do there may not be reflective of what they do everywhere. But then on the other hand, because it's a controlled environment, with a professional, that person may have done a lot of things to try to get their best performance, and that's something to consider when it comes to generalizing back to the natural environment. So identifying goals using the evaluations, review the evaluation. Okay, a lot of parents are handed these big documents and they don't read them. They file them, they give them to the next person, they take it from the psychologist and they give it to the special education team, what have you. You really need to review it yourself. And
Anything that you don't understand.
I want to make sure that you ask those questions, write in the margins, make copies of it, whatever you need to do. I like to use highlighting, so you can use a highlighter in one color for things that your child did really well, highlighter in another color for things that they had trouble with. You know, make sure that you're really looking through all of those notes. Notice anything that the tester facilitated responding with. So if they had to use something, we're going to go over case studies today to look at this. You know, make sure that you make note of the different modifications that they use. Ask yourself, do these challenges your child had during testing correlate to a specific skill acquisition protocol that could be implemented in their natural environments? So here's the case study one. This is a neurodevelopmental evaluation of a 5-year-old, and we're just going to look at one screenshot. So here's observations, and here's where I show that I use these different highlights to look at this evaluation and made notes on the side about, you know, what we could think about. So just looking at the highlights, she was challenged by open-ended verbal tasks that required her to formulate a response. So I wrote a note called statement or maintaining a topic. So like, can this person respond to different conversational skills and stimuli? Visual aids in the form of pictures helped her better understand a verbal test question and organize her response. So I would keep that in mind. What visual aids were used? What pictures were used? Why did they help her understand a verbal test question and organize her response? She also became oppositional, it says, in a playful manner. So what did that look like? Why did that happen? It was helpful for the examiner to use a behavior chart. So I wrote a note like a token system. Would it be teacher controlled or self-monitoring? So sometimes we have students themselves give themselves checks, give themselves stars, give themselves tokens, or give themselves notes to send home to mom. Those are fine. In an attempt to avoid a hard task, she tried to engage the examiner in questions and social games. So how will we be proactive about this? And by the way, I love this note because if I don't want to talk about something, I'm probably going to change the topic too. When her eye contact was sustained, this person was more responsive and focused with requests. So I put eye contact protocol, but with a big question mark. A lot of people in the neurodiverse community have reported that eye contact is extremely difficult for them and actually is very distracting. So if they're forced to provide eye contact, it is actually to their detriment and puts a huge cognitive load on them, which makes them less able to respond. For this particular learner, it says that when she was looking, she was actually more responsive. So just really be careful with eye contact. She benefited from frequent breaks from the testing table, and her attention was often better following the exercise. Be sure there are many opportunities for movement during therapy. Follows rules during the test session. Incorporate a token system. So you can see this is how I'll go through an evaluation. When my clients provide me with an evaluation that they get from a psychologist, this is exactly what I do. I go through every single page and I very carefully, and not just carefully, but I'm specifically looking for these kinds of things so I can make really rich notes on what I can use from this evaluation to inform my practice. So now what? Identify the prerequisites. So if you noticed something that needed to be worked on, what is the foundational skill that needs to be worked on in order to address that? Have those prerequisites been met? If they have, then you can go ahead and target those things that you need to work on. Meet or talk with the teacher to identify the same or similar goals in the IEP Direct, so or whatever IEP goal bank they're using, and change the wording if necessary. Work with your teacher. So you want this to be a collaborative process. You don't want it to be combative. It is very scary. It is very frustrating. The more you are able to create an environment of like respect and collaboration with your child's staff, not only will they be more receptive to what you have to say, but also you could feel more trusting that what your teachers and staff are saying is happening with your child is really happening. When generating goals, ask yourself the following. What kind of behavior are we teaching? Receptive or expressive language, play. So for example, receptive language is if somebody says something to me that I have to respond to. So for example, if they told me, go over there, I'm receiving that information that is receptive and I'm going over there. I'm acting on it, I'm not expressing, I'm not talking out loud or using a device to express an answer. But if they said, what's your name? And I either said Marcia, wrote Marcia, or pressed a button that vocalized Marcia on my AAC device, that's expressive language. What type of stimuli will we be using? Who is needed? So are we using pictures to teach the task? Are we using objects? Do we need another person? Sometimes we need a third person, such as if I say, hey, go ask Johnny if he wants to join us, right? So that would be, we need another person to help this child to learn that skill. Or is it just the child himself? What type of response are we expecting? Is it a learned response, so something that they're learning for the first time? A generalized response because they've learned it in one way and they need to generalize it to other locations or people or stimuli? Or is it spontaneous? Do we want to increase their spontaneous language, such as noting, like saying, oh, it's cloudy, just out of noticing that it's cloudy? So let's make some notes. She was challenged by open-ended verbal tasks that required her to formulate a response. Again, I wrote we could do reciprocal conversation, such as a little back and forth, statement, meaning I like chocolate. The other person says I like vanilla. That's statement. Categories or categories with qualifiers, such as, which is early topic maintenance. So if I say, hey, tell me 5 animals, we're not just working on animals. We're talking about locating files of information in the mind to really express what we know about that topic. And that's how we get into topic maintenance, when we can really teach children to really categorize and chunk information and also come up with qualifiers, which is like, tell me an animal that can fly. I put this little GIF here because I love that she became oppositional in a playful manner. Mischief is something I love. I think it's great. I think it's an act of freedom and rebellion that people need to be able to express no matter what their diagnosis is. At these times, it was helpful for the examiner to use a behavior chart. She worked for STARS, and after obtaining TED STARS, she was able to take a 2 to 3 minute break from the testing table to play by herself and move around the testing room. Fine. So they said they use a token system. I would probe that. I wouldn't just take that and use that verbatim. I would say, well, do we need 10? Can we use 5? Does it have to be 2 to 3 minutes? Can it be longer or shorter? What do we need? It's great that the token system worked, and not everybody responds the same way to token systems. So you're going to want to probe different systems and what the reinforcement is. So basic self-monitoring. So I would love to teach this person to just check on themselves and make sure that they're doing the right things rather than being, monitored by someone else. And target the child to time on task, like a behavior plan. So how long can this person focus? Does that need to increase? Right? But again, more play engagement. I'm going into a talk later in this series about play. One of my talks is titled Play is a Human Right. Okay, so you can't just target time on task and in-seat behavior, because what's happening in schools today isn't even optimal for kids. So we need to make sure that we're keeping room for play, room for freedom of movement, and we want to make sure that we're not, artificially contriving sedentary and controlling environments for children more than necessary. In an attempt to avoid a hard task, she tried to engage the examiner in questions and social games. Great. Again, I don't mind it. I think it's great. You don't like this? Change the subject. Wonderful. This kind of behavior is frequently inadvertently reinforced by an adult responding vocally to the child's initiation, and then the behavior strengthens. So if you tell your child, like, go clean your room, and they're like, wait, I have a question for you, and they come up with a whole new topic, that's something I've experienced many times with my own. And I just want to say, like, you can go ahead and want to talk and reinforce that type of behavior, but you also want to make sure that you check and understand that, like, if you're always reinforcing that behavior, you're going to get more and more and more of that avoidance. And then when it doesn't work, it can lead to more behavior problems down the line. When making notes, it's critical that this behavior be operational and defined. Teachers and parents are made aware of the behavior, and a redirection protocol is discussed and developed. So make sure you define it as something that is avoidant, because you really don't want to extinguish or discourage this child from engaging in the social games or asking questions. Subtle forms of escape and avoidance can lead to much larger challenges, as I mentioned, when they're shaped up via inadvertent reinforcement. So just make note of these things and give them as much importance as anything else that you do. Again, when her eye contact was sustained, she was more responsive and focused with requests. All right, I want to just fly through a few things because we have a lot to get through. So what do we have so far? Just based on those notes, we have 10 or maybe 9, thinking about the eye contact issue, programs from that one paragraph. So we have 10 things or 9 things that we can really try to look at and advocate for using this evaluation in the IEP process. And this is what they would look like as IEP goals. So if we're talking about play, you can say that, this person will follow an adult to different play areas because the adult can provide reinforcement and prompting and help that child to follow them through play areas, perhaps. Then that can generalize over to a child, and then they can also work on initiation. So mastery is during duration of time plus measurement of accuracy, the child needs to demonstrate a skill. So specific would be like 3 consecutive days at 90 to 100% independent, correct responding. Less specific is when we have those lower success rates and they're on 10 consecutive occasions, or some goals I read say like on 10 occasions. Well, that could happen over several months. That's not good enough, right? We really want our goals to be really specific. And higher quality goals in an IEP means that your team and your staff, again, are legally obligated to try to meet those goals. Generalization is, demonstrating a skill that was acquired in one setting across novel people, novel stimuli, novel locations, and across time, like maintenance. So how will the skill be generalized? When or how will generalization be taught, for how long, and how will it be assessed? So what happens after mastery? I find, I'll go to an IEP meeting with family, sit there and see something was mastered 6 months ago on the IEP. And there was no IEP meeting, there was no, email or any communication to say, hey, they mastered this, now we're gonna do this, we're gonna amend the IEP and add the next target. So what happened for 6 months on that goal? Nothing, right? So you really wanna make sure that you're thinking about that in the development of your IEP goals, because you don't have time to waste. The next one is for another evaluation where the same process takes place, a different notation style of circling. And again, looking at how we can make notes and how we can build off of that evaluation. I don't want to not have a Q&A session, so I'm just going to skip through that. But again, we have quite a lot of goals coming through from that one evaluation. And here's what it might look like as IEP goals. I'm going to stop here and talk about emotions for a second, because a lot of my talks coming up in this series address emotions. Emotions are one of the richest parts of a person's life. How they feel about their life, how they share their emotions. If this isn't a goal that's being worked on, you need to ask yourself why and see how your staff can start working on identifying emotions, expressing emotions, and processing emotions of others. So here I'm just gonna say that some of these goals has, and I like that there's a lot of objectives here. Again, when we talk about like mastery and knowing what to do next, it's nice to have several targets listed. So this person will act out a variety of appropriate emotions. So you might say like, show me sad, and they make a sad face. Show me happy, they make a happy face, fine. They'll identify emotions in pictures receptively. So if you say touch sad, touch happy, they can find them expressively saying, how does this person feel? And they have to say it. Then identifying emotions in others. So if you, show them live people and say, can you point to your friend who looks happy? Can you point to your friend who looks sad? Can you point to an adult who looks excited? And then accurately identifying emotions in themselves. So, saying I feel is one of the biggest things that parents want their kids to do. They would love for their children to say I feel. And something I teach a lot is I feel because, right? Because I really want students to not only say how they feel about something, but be able to articulate why they feel that way. And then the next one is inferring emotions based on contextual cues and pictures. So if a child is making an ambiguous face, but they're looking at their broken toy, then it would be great for this learner to look at that situation and infer that they might be sad. So what do these look like as IEP goals? Again, you want to have very clear language on what will happen, in how much time, with what type of mastery, and what the generalization will look like. And for management needs, this learner will be provided with the token economy, utilized consistently throughout the day to reinforce on-task behaviors and correct responding, and differential reinforcement will be applied to more independent responding. So that I left for you to look at, and I'm not going to read through all of it, because again, it's written intentionally that it will be utilized consistently throughout the day. Because if you don't specify that, then when your child transitions from the general room to the music room and their paraprofessional forgets to bring the token economy, and then they have a really hard time in music because they're reliant on that token economy for constant feedback of their behavior, you can say, well, you're not following the IEP because it's supposed to be used consistently throughout the day. So make sure, again, when you're talking about management, that you're as specific and crystal clear as possible. Here's some valuable resources for parents and professionals working with children with autism and related differences. So the National Autism Center is great. I strongly urge you to go sign up for that. Go to the link, sign up, confirm with your email, and download the PDF. So specifically, I would urge you to review phase 2. You'll find a list of strategies that are established in the research, emerging, or unestablished. So established means that we have plenty of research to show that this is a great treatment option, a great intervention option for your learner with autism, that it's been proven, against, years of research or across many researchers that it works. So established is the way to go. Emerging means that there's some success in the research, but we're not there yet, right? It needs more research, it needs to be done differently, or some of the research needs to be more fine-tuned to really say that this is a treatment option. And unestablished means don't do it. There's not enough research, or the research that's been done has shown that there are no good results, or it could even be dangerous. So this is quality controlled through really strict scrutiny of the studies. Again, I already mentioned ASAT and that there's dedicated pages there for you to go to. It's translated also into most of the popular languages in the world because ASAT's an international organization. They really pride themselves on trying to increase the dissemination to populations that need it the most. And also I linked a comprehensive IEP goal bank. I urge you to go to that link and check them out. Not all of the goals are going to be for your child, right? Not everybody needs all the goals, but you can at least get an idea of some of the goals that are possible and look for things that are relevant to your child to give you a place to start. You can Google this. It's IEP Goals and Objectives Bank in Redmond, Oregon, or you can send me your email address and I'll send the links to you. Again, my email is marcia.questel@yale.edu. And I want to take another minute to thank my PI, Dr. Roger Joe, and Krista Marcia Salt, who helped me today with just getting everything established on our calendar, making sure that everyone was able to get through our Zoom registration, and really just making sure that it went well and that all of our privacy was protected and that we didn't get any Zoom bombings. Spark at Yale is what we're doing here in Dr. Joe's group. We are really excited about this project, and Spark is providing, through the Simons Foundation, a lot of funding for research that's really meaningful to our population. Again, Casey Sparks, the Yale School of Medicine, and the Yale Child Study Center. None of this would be possible without you, so thank you so much. Again, here's the link to email us for Spark. And I also want to tell you that our PI, Dr. Roger Joe, is going to be at the Capitol on April 29th. So if you're in Connecticut, we really hope that you'll join us there. Maybe you can bring your child along, or maybe you can come on your own. Either way, this is going to be a really exciting opportunity to hear Dr. Joe speak, along with many other really great professionals and leaders in this area. And there's going to be tons of tables, for you to find resources as well. So if you come and join us there, you're going to see me and my colleagues and others from the GL Child Study Center, as well as tons of people from around Connecticut who are working with the autism community. And this is just a list of my upcoming talks. So thank you so much.